Our guest today is the Tomato King himself, Nick Huber. Thanks for being here, Nick.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of your guys' work, and I'm gonna have to get used to that nickname, I guess.
Do you think that's gonna stick? The Tomato King?
I've made some serious tweets since that moment, and over half the replies have been jokes about the tomatoes. So, I mean, we'll see. It was funny when it happened, and we'll see how long it stays funny. But when the cryptocurrency comes out and they see that we kind of took it serious and we got some good devs on board and put together a project around it, we'll see. I mean, it's all for fun. I'm learning a lot about crypto and tomatoes. So
that's awesome. You'll end up like Game of Thrones. You'll be like the Lord of self-storage and the King of tomatoes and the God of online courses and the Red Master.
I'll say that a distraction is easy to find in this world once opportunity comes. Early on in your career, you don't have much going on. And then later on, you can get sidetracked and work on something really silly for hours and hours and hours. So it's the way life works, I guess.
There's so much exciting stuff to do.
That's right. I'm having fun, man. I'm having a lot of fun. I know you guys are too.
Yeah. I'm hoping that just being easily distracted is now more of an advantage than a liability. That'd be huge for me. And it looks like for you too.
I think it is. Once you understand leverage and how your time really hits in certain areas and how valuable it is when you're doing what you do best, I think it's it's fun to play, but I think we're built to produce. So at least me.
Yeah, sometimes you produce a lot when you're just playing, and a few good hours can have crazy outcomes.
I'll procrastinate for months, or I'll feel like I go months without getting much done. And I said that wrong in the last statement when I said, I produce, but I'll get focused and I can be really surprised myself at how much I can create. But then I'll go months where I feel like I'm working really hard and not moving the needle at all. And I think that's just a normal part of business and life. And it's frustrating, but exciting too, because when it happens, it can come together really fast, but you can beat your head against the wall for months and not have much happen. So it's tricky.
Yeah. And then sometimes you look back and what felt like no progress was actually like you were just winding things up and like all of a sudden everything falls into place. And I mean, that's kind of a perfect like setup for what I think this conversation is going to be, which is mostly taking a look at some of the biggest like decisions and turning points and level ups in your career. So your career is super, super interesting. I think everybody's going to appreciate all of the kind of leaps that it took once they see everything here. And it looks like you've compressed the learnings of that most people have in their whole career into the first 10 years for you. So I'm excited to go into those in some detail and see what we can all learn.
I think I've compressed 20 years of learning in the past 12 months. But before that, I mean, it's interesting that you say patience and slow, how slow it can go, because there's a lull in the middle there from 2016 to 2018 where I feel like we didn't do a whole lot. It's really interesting how careers you can sit back and kind of have to just wait and watch. And that's the right thing to do at that time.
Yeah. Well, let's start at the beginning. Like what was the first kind of business that you started, and what was like the situation that pushed you to kind of take that leap?
So I grew up in Southern Indiana on a farm to two middle-class parents. They weren't farmers. We leased it out to farmers, but my parents came from middle-class background in Southern Indiana. I started a lawn care company kind of on my dad's whim. He started the business for me, put me on a lawnmower as a 13-year-old, and I got some experience, working really hard in the Southern Indiana heat in the summer and dealing with that, 20, 30 hours a week when all my friends were playing video games. And also I learned that I could make $40 an hour if I build the right way as even a kid on a lawnmower. And before I knew it, by the time I graduated, I had just a high school kid, when we started, I had a high school kid that was paid to drive me around because, my parents, we out on the farm, you have to have a truck and I didn't have a license. So, learned a little bit about business that way. And didn't do much with it. Shut the business, gave up the business to my brother when I went to college. Luckily, I got to go to Cornell University to run track and field. Just a blessing. Last guy recruited on the team, lowest SAT scores in the whole school, probably. Got in, met my business partner, Dan, freshman year, had fun with track, studying, didn't really call myself an entrepreneur. Senior year, stumbled upon an opportunity, actually junior year during finals week, stumbled upon an opportunity to store some people's stuff. Ran around campus like a maniac in my big old car, 1999 Cadillac DeVille, and just grinded for a whole week while everybody else was having fun. I was answering calls and picking up storage and loading boxes in my dorm, filled that room up with stuff and filled up, needed more space, called my business partner, Dan. He had a basement of a house in College Town, filled the entire basement up with boxes. We were running around like maniacs. Our friends were making fun of us because they were having fun and we were like sweating in spiral staircases, carrying boxes. That was my first taste of entrepreneurship. And it's not the kind of entrepreneurship most people think of, even as I didn't call myself an entrepreneur. I didn't think it was going to be the next big thing. I was like, hey, here's an opportunity for me to make some money.
Yeah.
We did it. Worked our butt off that week, ended the week with $8,000 cash sitting on a bed. And we're like, wow, that was kind of fun. Maybe we can make something of this. And we were just two excitable kids, man. We were 22 years old and we're like, this is going to be huge. And, we got to work, I didn't get an internship that summer, worked on what we called Storage Squad, was our first business, pickup and delivery student storage. And, explaining that to your parents when all your Ivy League friends are going to get jobs in New York City, making $150 a year, and you're going to start a moving company when they sent you to the Ivy League and you're the only one from your county to ever go to the Ivy League. And they thought you were going to be the one to make it. And you decide to start a service business like that. It was interesting,
who's
but
laughing now?
I guess you could say that, but I lived on my parents' dime for a little while after that because we weren't making any money, but yeah, learned business a little bit that way, grew the business slowly. We got really aggressive because we knew the opportunity cost was real with our Ivy League degrees. Went to a couple extra schools. I think one of my strengths throughout the years was convincing other people to be excited with me. So we got some other friends excited at Indiana University, Iowa, Illinois, and just got uncomfortable and bought a bunch of really crappy cargo vans on Craigslist, sent them out there, talked to these folks into running the business for us. And, fast forward 5 years, we were in 12 states and 30 colleges and had built a little business.
So when you first got started there, like, did you have a long-term vision of what this thing was going to be? Or were you just kind of like looking around like, I can make $8,000 in 2 weeks. Like, I'm going to do this.
No, I think we wanted to take over the world. We're like, we're going to go to every single college. We were looking at our competitors. One of them had gotten acquired by U-Haul the year before. That excited us. And we didn't realize back then how hard that business was. And, Uber was coming of age on the phones and people were, really into the technology, and to have an Uber show up, an empty car show up to pick somebody up, and have a moving truck with dollies and drivers and boxes and supplies. And then, on the way back, delivering the stuff, you had to show up when they wanted it, right when they landed. The logistics behind that, of doing that in 25 schools all at the same time when you can only be in one location in one city, is we learned a hell of a lot about delegation, management systems, and business. And that's, you look back to a shifting point. We were doing it for the money, but we didn't realize that the skills we were learning during that time were just changing the way we thought about everything and making us comfortable. Even what we're doing now with self-storage, most people would be totally uncomfortable even trying it, but we know that it's nothing compared to what we did back in 2013 when we were grinding.
Yeah, which you already put yourself through accidentally. Moving is a tough industry already, but the fact that you do a year's worth of moves in a week is insane. Like,
go from 6 full-time employees to 300 part-time employees. You're preparing for the Super Bowl, and then we learned business on the fly. So many years we were sleeping in the warehouses, staying up all hours, for 3 weeks straight, sleeping 2 hours, renting really crappy warehouse space in Everett, Massachusetts, and turning it into a mini apartment for our management team. It was a grind, man. We didn't have a lot of capital, and we were just doing the best we could.
Nick, you have approximately 10 employees per city then at that time. And then how did you recruit them and train them?
They were all students. Flyers, sidewalk chalk, email listservs. We got really resourceful on how to recruit people because it's not easy, right? We operated at the wealthy private schools and Ivy League schools. So these kids had other opportunities to go make money, and you're trying to recruit them to drive a truck for $15 an hour. And then you have to train them in about 2 hours on how to do that in a competent way. It was very hard.
And the other thing I think you skipped over it in this version of the story, but that I've heard you say before, is that this idea came about because you just had spare capacity in you had a 12-month lease that you couldn't get out of during the summer. And so you're just like, you just kind of looked at the assets that you already had available to you and tried to figure out how to monetize them.
Yeah, we didn't invest $1 that wasn't already sunk cost when we started the business. So I put my apartment on Craigslist, tried to find a sublet. A mother of a student reached out to me and said, "Hey, I don't want to lease your apartment over the summer, but my son really hates the company that does storage at Cornell. There's this company that sucks. Can you come and pick up his stuff and put it in your room?" And I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to lease this thing. Okay, I'll do it. And she like got me all the way down to $150 to where I barely made any money. And but I went up there and did it. And once I did that, I couldn't lease the place. So then I had no choice but to fill it up with storage. So I drove around in the car that I already had. I printed flyers, using net printing at Cornell that I already had paid for. I mean, all of it was just a free startup bootstrap. So the $8,000 was purely off the back of our 80 hours of work.
That's awesome. And you mentioned in there your business partner, Dan, too. Talk a little bit about him and like how you guys met and decided to become partners. And was that like, could this business has survived like just you?
It's interesting because you fast forward to now and he just rejoined. We sold that company in January of 2021. He just rejoined me. I mean, we split up basically in 2016 and I not split up by any means, but like divided. He stayed with the service business, managing that business. And I went and did this self-storage venture to like, okay, let's invest some of this capital we have into assets, into long-term assets. This business doesn't have the long-term staying power. Lumpy income, all the things about digital, it doesn't have any of that. So let's diversify into self-storage. Nick, you go focus on that. I'm going to run this business. So we spent from 2016 to 2018 or 2021. We sold in January 2021. We spent that time apart, and he's back now. And the guy is a badass. And I'm learning. I get to see it again. I'm like, oh my God, I missed you. You put him in a business that is scalable and has some serious tailwinds, and it's amazing what he can do. But yeah, it was sheer luck. I walked into his room. He was a good buddy of mine. He got excited, and we shook hands and split the business 50-50. I did all the things wrong when it comes to choosing a partner, but it worked out because he was very competent, just like me, but very competent. I would say that I'm more excitable, energetic, rah. And Dan is more, okay, calm down. How are we going to execute this? And that's the personality balance, but our skill set was the same as far as same major, same Midwest background, same upbringing, same scrappiness. And yeah, the rest is history. And it was a phenomenal pairing of a guy that I could trust and somebody who can get it done.
Yeah, that's huge. And like a lot of stories don't end that way. So yeah, I mean, luck, intuition, or skill, that's wonderful. So where, was there a specific point at which Storage Squad went from kind of like maybe a short-term, like opportunistic venture into like, oh, we're going to spend like years on this?
I think looking back, it took a lot longer to grow than what we thought originally. We started in 2011, we sold in 2021. That's 10 years. I didn't know it was going to take that long. And really looking back, we didn't really make that much money. We learned a lot, but the business sold for 1x EBITDA last year, right? So not a lot of value that we created for ourselves either on the grand scheme of considering how much work it was. But I think 2013 was the shift. I mean, that was an extremely stressful year. We blew out how many customers we got. It was a profitable year, but our systems were trash and our life was stressful and we barely pulled it off by the skin of our teeth. Miserable year, like mental breakdown type anxiety on the streets of Boston because the business is falling apart because you have too many customers. We got serious about taking ownership over the employee side of things and the training and the systems that next year. So we simplified the jobs for our employees. We said, okay, it's not the employee's fault. It's our fault. We need to handle this. And we built out the systems and made their life easier. And from there, we were able to grow in 2014, 15, 16, were all really good, profitable years and less stressful every single year.
What were some of those systems that made things less stressful and took you from like, that you took accountability for, I guess?
We had, to put in perspective, we had these little LTE tablets. Not everybody had a smartphone yet. A lot of people had flip phones, and our drivers needed to have LTE because we did Google Sheets, live update. Our competitors were using clipboards and calling each other and all that. And we were trying to be innovative. So we got these little LTE tablets with Google Sheets, and that's how we ran our business. Okay. On the back of that tablet, there was a checklist of 25 things they needed to do. Drive the truck, call the customers, make the schedules, answer the phones, all the way down to load the truck, label the boxes, create the invoice. We had drivers creating the invoice, billing, like we charge per item. They were judging how big the items were. And when we asked them to do all this stuff, it was impossible for them to do anything well. So the next year we said, okay, how can we take some of these really critical roles off of their plates? So instead of write the invoice, which they were hemorrhaging money for us because they were charging small items like large items and large items like small items, they didn't care, right? We had them take a picture of the stuff and send it to somebody on a computer who could make the entire invoice online. Labeling the items is the number one mistake, because if you don't label a box, it's over. If that gets back to the warehouse and it's got nobody's name on it, you're in trouble. That was happening all the time. Okay, so let's focus on that one job. Like your job, one of the guys, label everything. That's it. Take the photo of it. The other guy's driving. Take the customer service off their plate. Have a different crew at the warehouse so that they don't have to drive back and unload the trucks. So we started doing like dropping off empty trucks to them so they could do that stuff. And we whittled it down to like 5 core things that they needed to do well. And when we did that, training got easier. The customers got happier. The schedules were tighter. The business was better. And it was able to scale a little bit.
Yeah. So like simplifying massively each individual role, hiring some more specialties, and packaging up that information for employees so that you could train people up in 2 hours on what they actually needed to do and function well.
I think there's a big misconception in entrepreneurship that autonomy is great and chaos is good, and people want to figure things out for themselves. I think that is a cop-out and a terrible way to run a business. Entrepreneurs like chaos. I like chaos. I like problem solving because I feel like I've made enough high pressure decisions that I can do it well. You put somebody who doesn't care about your business in a position to make big decisions, and it's a recipe for disaster. They're not going to be happy. The customer's not going to be happy, and nobody wins. People want to be told what to do. And we learned that. Hey, I'm here to get my money so that I can go home and do what I want to do. Tell me how to do that well, and I'll be happy. But if this is going to be stressful, then this is going to suck. You know what I mean? So that was a huge learning for us.
And people who are, maybe seasonal employees, like for relatively low wage, don't have like this crazy incentive around solving all of the problems of your business. Like they don't want to take on uncertainty. They just want to do what they need to do in a sane environment and get paid and go home.
And I think it trickles all the way up to management. I mean, what we're learning now in our self-storage business is that the same employees, they want processes. They want to know when certain things are deliverable. Like when we go under contract on a self-storage facility, it used to be chaos. Okay, what do we need? We need a survey. We need deed. We need title work. We need to get the bank meeting. We need to do all these things. Now we have a checklist that says, Amanda, you do this. Kevin, you do that. This is when you need to do it by. And everybody loves that.
Yeah. So I want to do like deep dive on that too, actually. So let's get into self-storage. So what was the context that got you? And I know you built your first self-storage site, but like not just why self-storage, but like what was the moment when you kind of decided to make that leap into what was a totally different line of business for you guys from spending 5 years building Storage Squad initially?
We were living extremely frugally. We had about $700,000 saved up after tax. And we decided, okay, we can go buy nice cars and start having fun, or we can figure out a way to invest this. We didn't know anything about the markets. Stock market crash of 5 years ago was right in the back of our heads, and we were scared of that. So like, okay, let's build a building. My dad worked for a developer. He was a middle manager at a development company that built nursing homes. And he's an excitable guy just like me. So when I said I want to build a self-storage facility one day on a whim, he said, we can do that. He's like, we can do that. We can do it now. You guys need to find a piece of property. Me and Danny got all excited. And a week later, we had an offer in on a piece of property. That whole week, we spent analyzing 20 markets and learning everything we could about rents and occupancy and blah, blah, blah. We chose Ithaca, bought a piece of property, knew nothing about real estate, the tax code, how to structure deals, how to talk to bankers, how to operate self-storage. But we looked at self-storage as, okay, how hard can it be when these folks who are doing self-storage and doing it really well are making great money, and they're running it on paper, and they're running it without answering the phones, and they're running it at 100% occupancy, which even back then, we knew that you don't want to be 100% occupied in a self-storage facility, or you're charging too little. So we said, okay, the competition here seems really weak. There's a lot of dumb people making really good money in self-storage. How can we go do that?
Interesting. So, I mean, it started of just like, we got a pile of cash, we need to put it to work. Like,
right.
Give this money a job. And I think, do I have it right that you were 24 when you did this?
Early planning stages. Yeah. When we got it open, when we actually put the deal together. By then we were 26, because of new development, self-storage, you got to go through zoning, you got to go through plan approvals. Looking back, it was an insanely stupid decision to build a self-storage facility knowing nothing about real estate. Nowadays, we got bailed out by the market and we operated it really well. And it was a huge windfall for us in 2019. So really a blessing that we did it. But looking back, we would have bought a small property and operated that instead.
Yeah. So like, that's something I noticed, like you built your first facility and that was enough. Seems like everything after that you have bought. Why is the change? Like, what are you buying when you acquire an existing property versus building your own?
So building your own, you're building to maybe a 13% cash on cash yield 3 to 4 years from now. Buying a self-storage facility, you're buying an 8% cash on cash yield today. So the risk adjusted return. And also when we built that storage facility, we came in with a $1.7 million budget. I went from kitchen table to kitchen table. I wasn't a country club kid. I didn't know wealthy people. I worked my butt off and took 100 meetings to raise the money for that first deal. We raised $500,000 from friends and family. Then we had to go back to them and ask for 25% more money because the project ended up costing $2.4 million when we had a $1.7 million budget. So we had a bad taste in our mouth from that, how long it took. And we're like, okay, well, actually we spent $50 a foot to build this storage facility. And yeah, it's climate controlled. Yeah, we can charge more rent, but this facility over here on the other side of town, it's full and we can buy that for $55 a square foot. It's better from a cash flow and value add perspective.
So you're really buying like time to begin earnings so that your ROI is sooner.
That's right. Yeah. Lower risk adjusted return, or a better risk adjusted return, because development's risky. You got to fill it up, everything.
Yeah. Less ways for things to go wrong. You start out at a higher percent occupancy. You're not starting from zero. So even though it's cheaper to build the building financially, like rather than building the business, it is faster and on a risk adjusted basis, better to just buy an existing business, even if it's relatively poorly run, right? Like that's kind of another part of your thesis.
So this is why it's so exciting. And this is why we're absolutely going nuts now with 24 facilities and over 500,000 square feet. Is we made some initial predictions of what would happen if we bought operational facilities. Okay, we're buying a property in Erie, Pennsylvania. It's full. We think we can maybe raise rents 5 or 10%. We think we can cut costs 5 or 10%. What's happening in reality is we're buying self-storage facilities that charged $52 for a 10 by 10. And we're finding out the market rent is $77, $85 for a 10 by 10 if you market and answer the phone and have a place to rent on your website. And so you talked to me a year ago and I was all excited about how we can cut costs by doing remote management without a full-time employee at every facility. Like put it in perspective. In Ithaca, New York, we have a 51,000 square foot facility and there's a competitor a mile away with a 51,000 square foot facility. They have 80 grand in yearly payroll to run their facility because they have 2 managers that staff retail hours and they stop answering the phone at 6 o'clock.
Yep.
We have 24 facilities, 642,000 square feet, and 6 customer service reps, 6 that manage all of them. And 5 of them are in the Philippines for $12,000 a year. So we can operate per square footage much cheaper. So that was very exciting from the beginning, but also just implementing revenue management techniques and marketing and blocking and tackling and doing. Everybody thinks real estate is passive. Real estate is very much small business oriented. And if you can out operate everybody else, you can have a significant advantage. And so go back to the lessons that we learned at Storage Squad, running Bolt Storage now. We just have a huge advantage over a lot of the players.
Yeah, I think
if I could, Eric, just briefly.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
A risk. You brought up your father. You said he gave you a great foundation and encouraged you to take risks. He modeled that as an example and so forth. And yet, on the other hand, you have a philosophy that I believe I've heard you talk about, entering low risk businesses. So I just wanted to resolve that apparent contradiction and how you think about risk.
I don't feel like I've ever taken massive risk ever. The business Storage Squad, we said, okay, if we don't hit 250 customers year one, we're going to go get jobs. That was the risk. Like the opportunity cost was the risk for us. We knew that our time as 22-year-olds, we were learning a lot. It was fun. So we just did a little more every single year. We never took out debt. We never had a big credit line. We never did anything crazy with that business. And then in self-storage, I mean, we looked at the competitors and they were so bad, and we feel like we could dominate the market where we built our first facility. We knew when we got the doors open we were going to be fine, and we were. And now I don't feel like I'm getting there's a lower risk way to get great cash adjusted returns than go around buying self-storage facilities. So I don't look at entrepreneurship as a risky endeavor. I look at it as, hey, where can I find the easiest path of least resistance to success and wealth, and go that way.
When have you felt the most exposed though in this journey so far?
I'd say 2013, when our business was falling apart, and we had one guy drives down Sturo Drive in Boston that doesn't, it's no trucks, and he ripped the top off of one of our trucks in the middle of a rainstorm. Another guy puts diesel fuel in gasoline in a diesel fuel engine and then abandons the truck on the street. He just went home because he had worked for 40 hours that week already, and it was only Thursday. He went home and left. And I'm getting, me and Dan were fielding the customer service calls, and the whole business was falling apart at our biggest location in Boston during deliveries. And I hadn't slept in a week. That's probably still to this day. I mean, I look back at those days with pride because we got through it, but absolute misery, right? Absolute misery.
That's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
What is like, so now that you've sold the self-storage business or the student storage business, you're now almost all of your investments and assets are in this kind of self-storage class, right? But you're diversified across all of the different facilities and all the different geographies, but you're really operating in one very specific like type of business. Do you what are the things that keep you up at night as far as like what would have to go wrong for that lever to push back on you, right? And for like the debt load on these businesses and real estate to be too high?
Mm-hmm. I think natural disaster, losing a couple of the assets to a flood or hurricane or something like that is a risk. We have a couple properties that are in a flood zone that we do have flood insurance on, but it would set us back in a major way if we lost those. I mean, I'm confident. I feel really good about the leverage levels. We could take an 8% interest rate in real estate and survive and hold on to these assets, whereas every other operator that I know would lose their buildings if interest rates went to 8%. So
what do you do differently that makes you able to take that 8%?
Well, we buy a 5% cash on cash yield for the current owners. When we buy it, we turn it into an 8% cash on cash yield year one for us. And then year two, when we're stabilized, it's even better. It's 10, 12. So it's just cash flow. We're focusing on cash flow. I mean, in real estate, you have two options. You can try to get a lot of appreciation, which what we did with our development, build it for 2.4 million. We refinanced it 5.2 million in 2019. Huge win. Like we doubled the value.
Yeah.
But, if you're doing a new development or you're buying assets in Austin, Miami, that are really expensive assets that you're hoping for appreciation, they don't cash flow that well. You're kind of dependent on some levers outside of your control. What's somebody else going to pay for my property? All these other things where we don't care if anybody ever wants to buy our properties because they cash flow.
So is it the increased profit margin because of your operating skill? Is it the fact that you have like a sack of cash at your side? So even if you have to like front debt payments for a little while, you can still hold the properties and you won't get any forced liquidation. Is there anything else that goes into your ability to kind of, the thing that I'm picturing is you managing really long levers and like a riskier situation, but because you have in your business some unique attributes, like you're able to take on more, what seems like more risk, but that isn't actually more risk.
You're right.
So yeah, I'm trying to tease apart what all those things are that like set you apart and make you more able to manage that.
We have leverage in this business because of our operational chops, period. I mean, we can buy assets, we can pay more than other buyers, and they're worth more to us than they are to anybody else because of the way that we can operate them, the way that we can manage revenue, the way that we can drive rentals, the way that we can do marketing, the way that we can cut overhead on operations. We're really good at buying out contracts on the ground, like snow removal, all these things that you need to do. We have a team that has a system of how to get those things in place with good contractors at good prices. Just top to bottom, I think it's our operational leverage that gives us so much power in real estate. People think real estate is a passive investment. The people who win in real estate have something that makes those properties worth more to them than anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so interesting about self-storage. I think it transacts like real estate and you can underwrite it like real estate, but you can get an operational advantage, which like that's not as true if you're just buying like industrial real estate or residential, right? Or do you see some of those opportunities?
I think the sweatier the business with a real estate play, the better. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. The more moving parts, people, not anybody can get in the real estate game because you have 400 tenants. You have to get them in. You have to deal with the turnover. It's a small business, right? It's sweaty. You got to deal with some crap. And the passive triple net leases that trade at 4 caps, those are the ones that they're worth the same to everybody because the rent's the same every month and you don't have to do anything. It's truly passive. We like the sweaty stuff. So, I mean, yeah, there's tons of asset classes just like it, right? There's, tons of them, right? I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but yeah, it's like mobile homes, RV parks, cemeteries. There's tons of real estate plays that are just great.
I have a question for you in response to this. It seems like you've proven the model to yourself to like a Jesuit's level of degree. So what's the limiting constraining factor from just scaling it with just pouring gasoline on the fire? It seems like you're scaling very fast right now. You're doing deals constantly, but why not 10x that?
Yeah, so we have a goal internally to buy $100 million worth of real estate in the next 12 months. So it's on. Like we have the data from some recent acquisitions. We have the LP capital from Twitter and of all things, and we have some cash from selling our business and having a pretty good year last year and refinancing some of our early projects. So it's on. Yeah, we went from 6 employees 6 months ago to 17 employees today.
Is that all in the real estate world specifically?
Yeah, so only bulk storage. That's right. Yeah, 5 people on the acquisitions team because acquisitions is the bottleneck. It's really hard to find deals. If you had to ask, what's the limiting factor, it's the acquisition pipeline. But yeah, I would say the the operations side of the business is the rest of the employees.
So let's look at maybe where you are now compared to where you started in the self-storage world, right? And like, I imagine you're just cruising with a lot more horsepower than you used to. So like, it's got to be easier for you to find those buying opportunities now. If acquisitions is the pipeline, like those opportunities got to be much easier for you to find now. What changed between now and then, and why is that easier?
We've leveraged the power of Twitter to get investors. That has totally changed my game. I've also leveraged the power of Twitter to get, I mean, this sounds silly, right? If you're listening to this and you're not on Twitter, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but Twitter has accelerated my career by 20 years. From mentors like Moses Kagan and Chris Powers who do this, except they do it at a way larger scale than me and they're better than me and I can learn from them and they want to help me, to having the mental feedback of, okay, I'm going to post about my deals, knowing that really smart people are going to critique it and tell me what I'm doing wrong and help me spot my blind spots, to people who want to invest in self-storage, reaching out to me to get in touch and see how they could potentially get involved. It's thrown fuel on the fire. And then we also have more data pouring into our system every single month on how all of our current assets are doing. So we can underwrite deals better. We know how much return we can get on a deal better, and all those things. It's just a big flywheel. Business is so much about momentum that, starting from scratch with a new big idea just seems impossibly daunting when you think about the leverage that you get over time with operations and network and capital and all the things that kind of compound together as you get better and better and better at what you do.
Yeah. So what are the things that you've done like on Twitter? And I know you also have a podcast. So this is going to kind of blow people's minds who have been thinking of you just as a real estate sweaty guy so far, but like probably half of your life now is also like digital media and products. And let's get into that part. Like, where did that start? How does it come from? How is it affected? Like, let's get more into the synergies maybe between like that part of your life and the real estate world.
Yeah. So I have a passion for teaching, and mainly because, it, in a selfish way, it helps me get better. Teaching helps me get a lot smarter and sharpen my axe. So yeah, 2 years ago, I started the Sweaty Startup podcast for fun, but I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my network. Entrepreneurship's a lonely thing. You don't just have everybody, proximity makes up most of your friends, and proximity is, it's very rare that you're going to meet other entrepreneurs. So 2018 launched the Sweaty Startup podcast. about small business and how my small business was changing my life and what it was doing and why more people should focus on sweaty startup opportunities. And I had nowhere to promote it. So I got on Reddit in the entrepreneurship subreddit and started learning how to write copyright and get people to click through to my website and get people to go to my podcast and add as much value as I could on the internet. And I just shared everything I knew, shared the lessons I was learning, and got really good at copywriting. And Reddit was brutal. People are so mean there. I got roasted day in and day out. So it also gave me really thick skin. That helps on Twitter now.
That's handy on Twitter.
Yeah. Twitter's nothing. I mean, shit. You can't block people on Reddit, so they can just continue to hammer you and hammer you and hammer you and hammer you. Whereas the people who are really mean and they're not up for any good, you can just block them on Twitter. But a friend named Moses Kagan, who from real estate Twitter, who tweets about his deals, he came on my podcast. He met me he saw me on Reddit, met me, came on my podcast, and just to talk about entrepreneurial opportunities that he sees in the sweaty startup space. And he, at the end of the call, he's like, Nick, why don't, you're in real estate too. Why don't you talk about that on Twitter? Why don't you get on Twitter? There's a thriving community. And I said, you know what, Moses, like social media is not in my 80-20. It's no value to me. It's really hard to make money there. I got to focus on my career, blah, 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 blah. He said, well, you're wrong, Nick, but okay, whatever. 6 months later, he texted me again and said, Nick, just thought you should know that I did the biggest deal in my life and we raised almost all the money through Twitter, people I met on there. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. He's like, go on Twitter and tweet about your deals. He's like, you can't advertise securities. Don't try to get people to buy your stuff. Just talk about you and what you do. And there's a community there of investors that wants to get to know people and do X, Y, Z. So I took a radical approach to Twitter, as I do almost everything, and just started sharing everything about everything. I was posting my profit and loss statements. I was talking about the dynamics of deals. Real estate is a very secretive, hush-hush, close-knit community. There's people who do real estate and they do real estate because their families did real estate, and that's about it. It's really hard to break in. The dynamics are really complicated. There's a ton of language to it. It's just like how crypto kind of feels like something, if you're an outsider, you're just not welcome. Anyway, started tweeting about my deals, and sure enough, the people who did real estate deals and invested in real estate deals, we started to talk and we started to become friends and we started to collaborate. And I think 3 months after I got on Twitter with only 4,000 followers, I raised about $500,000 for a self-storage deal all through Twitter that I would not have been able to do without it. So, and then the flywheel went kind of crazy after that.
Yeah, there's a lot of leverage in that. I mean, I'm surprised to hear that at 4,000 followers. I know, like, you have gone basically from 0 to over 100,000 followers faster than any non-celebrity I've ever seen. How did that happen? Like, what was maybe some of the single biggest leaps
I think so. A couple things I learned about Twitter is that every tweet needs to have a purpose, and I'm not the best at it. It requires discipline, but if you sit around and tweet all day about stuff that doesn't make smart people think, people don't want to follow you. They're going to unfollow you, actually. So I started tweeting way less. And when I did tweet, it was threads. It was about my deals. It was about trying to make smart people think about something. That was my goal. Every tweet, if a smart person isn't going to look at that and say, oh, I haven't really thought about it that way, or, oh, that's interesting, or, oh, look what this guy's doing, then I didn't tweet it. And it kind of helped that I was doing some stuff. I was in the process of selling my company. We went through some craziness with COVID. I was tweeting about what I was up to, and it was interesting to people, so that I was sharing it all.
Yeah. It seems like you become this kind of like very embattled like flag between like Silicon Valley and like cash flow camps, like, for lack of a better term. Is that like, do you intentionally like stand there because it's good for your Twitter, or like, do you subject yourself to that intentionally?
I don't fight it as hard anymore. I mean, my opinion is softening a little bit, but yeah, I came into Twitter I'm still kind of an arrogant guy. I try to stay humble, but I come in saying, you guys are wrong. Venture capital sucks. Like, why are you guys all taking these freaking moonshots when there's this plumber that didn't even graduate high school that doesn't know how to type a text message that makes $3 million a year in my town?
Yeah.
Why are you guys choosing to compete with big money? And so I was all over Silicon Valley for the first 6 months on Twitter, and it resonated with a lot of people because, again, I was writing good copy and I was in it and I was doing it, and I was proof that it could work.
Yeah. People love anybody charging at the status quo, I guess, right? And being the voice of the underdog.
Yeah, so I leaned into that obviously because a little bit of nuance. I mean, there's a very clear way to write engaging tweets, and it's, say something controversial in the first line, say something that everybody agrees with in the second line, and then tease out the nuance in the rest of the thread. And that's all copywriting is, and that's all I did. And yeah, I got some momentum that way.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder if you feel pressure now to like, I don't know. Twitter. I struggle with Twitter because I sometimes like the more nuance you allow yourself, the closer you are to like a real person with nuanced opinions, the less interesting you are, and the less people like fight and battle on your behalf. Like, do you feel pressured to basically dumb down your real life opinion for like results on Twitter?
I'll say that I do it to learn a little bit as well. I'll say a controversial thing that is kind of a loosely held opinion, but I'll frame it in a very strong way. And that teases out good arguments on the other side and good arguments on my side and a great discussion. It creates an engaging discussion. I know it can come off, some people don't like following me on Twitter, and that's fine. You can't please everybody, but it's working for me in some ways. So
can we talk about two of them in particular that just came to my mind?
Yeah, sure.
The first one is don't marry a doctor or a lawyer. And the second one is if you're not in the top 1% by third grade in a sport, you shouldn't travel around all, God's creation and all, dedicate your life, live vicariously through your children and so forth. I would love.
It's easy for me to judge how people live their life sitting back here. And, some people think the things that I do and spend time with, and the fact that I spend 20 hours a week on a golf course hitting a white ball around is pretty insane as well. Right. But, I mean, I don't know any. Again, I speak in absolutes. I know very few happy doctors and lawyers under the age of 40 years old. Very few. If my daughter came home at high school and said, or in college and said, I'm married, I really like this guy and he's going to go to law school at Cornell next year, or I really like this guy and he's pre-med and he's going to be a doctor. I think I would be, obviously I'd let her do what she wanted to do, but it would hurt me inside knowing that she's going to be alone until she's 40. Odds are she's going to be alone until she's 40. It's just statistics, right?
Yeah. I love, my favorite thing is when you have a tweet that is getting ratioed or that is going viral, you will double down on the position. And then the next 10 tweets in the thread, you don't do the whole thread at once. It's like, you'll double down with 10 more tweets after the first viral one. I love that.
Yeah. And I do know I know a lot of 50-year-olds attorneys that sit at the golf course and don't work at all and live a great life, but they're on their third wife sometimes, you know what I mean? So I don't know. There's nuance there, just like everything. And but I also think parents living a stressful life because they're traveling their kids 3 hours away to play sports I see it in my network of these parents that are just not happy and they can't do anything and they're stressed about it and they're arguing about who's going to take this person to this game. It's like, is the professional, is a college scholarship or a professional contract that important to where you're not being present and enjoying your life? It's tough.
Yeah. I think you're I've heard you talk before about like the work should be in service of life, not life in service of work, which I feel like is like what you're getting at with some of that.
And it gets really hard. I know you struggle too, Eric, because your network is exploding and your business is accelerating just as fast as mine. And when that happens, the opportunities come quicker than ever. And to say no is really, really hard once you get the leverage to double down and continue to do whatever it is you want to do, whether it be make money or make an impact or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I think everybody has a point in their lives where they have to learn to, their opportunity cost just changes really, really fast. And they have to change their sensitivity to opportunities and triage much more aggressively than they have before for whatever reason, right? Whether it's personal or professional, and that's just a hard shift to make.
It's a hard balance. At what point is it too much to, tell your friends from high school you don't feel like getting together with them anymore and stuff? It's tough.
Yeah, the priorities change constantly, and at different rates for different people. So, and so, do you think of, and this I think is happening for you because you're like you've got this whole like thriving self-storage business, and you're now building like this kind of digital media empire too, right? Like you're meeting people through Twitter, you're creating your podcast.
I'm
And
much more excited about that stuff than I am about storage almost. I mean, storage lights me up, and we're building a real estate private equity company and my goal is to make it live without me 12 months from now. I don't want to be
yeah.
a part of it 12 months from now.
Oh, wow.
I love the media. I love it. I feel alive when I'm talking to you about this stuff, and when I'm recording a podcast episode, and when
Yeah.
I'm doing consulting calls, or when I'm recording a course and clarifying my thoughts and getting my message out. That's what makes me feel alive and what I find really rewarding.
Did you just like, when did that start? Did you like start that after you kind of found resonance with your message on Twitter? Was it starting the podcast and starting to meet people and like feeling the momentum of that?
I'd be lying if I didn't admit that it has a little bit to do with my ego.
We're all here for our ego.
Everybody likes to listen to themselves talk and to feel important. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's one of our desires. And I try to not get a big head and not become an arrogant asshole, but I know that I do it partly because it's fun when people care what you have to say.
Yeah.
But no, the results are also awesome. I mean, getting on a call and helping somebody buy a storage facility, and then getting a call from them 8 months later, and they're like, "Hey, Nick, are you home? I'm delivering something to your house, because that call that we had 8 months ago totally changed the shape of my career. I just quit my job and I bought my 4th self-storage facility, and and then like something cool, he sends a bottle of liquor or something to my house or something stupid. But it's really fun to also hear the 25-year-olds who are in a sweaty startup, and they're like, Nick, I wouldn't have started this without listening to the sweaty startup in 2018, and I just did 200 grand this year in profit, and I out earned all my friends, and I'm it's really cool. It's cool. I mean, there's some downsides too, because this stuff's harder than I make it sound, and I make it sound really sexy on Twitter. I make it sound really sexy in my podcast, and my biggest fear is having a bunch of, or any 40-year-olds that are stuck in a business they hate, and they drink 6 beers every night, and they work 80 hours a week, and they have no assets, and it just didn't work for them.
Yeah, I mean, everything sounds harder is harder than it sounds on a podcast, right? Like the first time I heard Brent Beshore on Patrick O'Shaughnessy's
Brent, I love Brent
podcast. Brent's an amazing guy, and he's if anybody's interested in what Nick is doing, you will also be interested in what Brent is doing. It's kind of it's a similar ethos, and I remember the first episode he did, like Brent made it sound really, really easy, and then the second episode he came back and was like, the whole episode was like all the reasons why this is way harder than I made it sound in the first recording, which I thought was really, really interesting and a super helpful like degree of detail, right?
Yep.
So you mentioned in there like your calls with people who like helping people buy storage facilities, and I think your attitude around like this is about risk minimization. You have not taken big risks, and the transition between how you started doing consulting calls and how that evolved into your online course, I think is a really interesting kind of micro example of that. Will you kind of talk us through that and maybe all the way up through where the course is now?
Yeah, I like testing things. I'm always testing. If you follow me on Twitter, if you're into structure and focus, it might drive you nuts, because I mean, I've made a tweet on December 1st, 2020. Hey, I'm thinking about writing a little crash course on real estate. And I just started taking screenshots because I got in a creative mood. I started writing. Next thing I know, I look up, there's 3,000 or 4,000 words and a big outline. And I started screenshotting it and putting it on Twitter, and I started getting feedback, and people are like, holy shit, this is cool. And it just evolved into a real estate masterclass 2 months later that was released on March 1st. And $300,000 in revenue on the first 3 days from that thing. So that was also a very fun experience to write the course, because I learned a lot. I thought I knew real estate until I had to teach it, and it became another level. But
and that came from that curriculum came from the consulting calls, basically, right? Like people started asking you, DMing you questions once you started sharing your tweets, and you started doing paid calls, I think hourly things, and giving people homework, and like the snowball of that, I thought was super interesting.
Yeah, it was all a comfort zone. I mean, it would have been a huge risk for me to do none of that and then just go into a big giant real estate masterclass priced at $2,000. But I did a couple consulting calls at $200 an hour, and then a couple of consulting calls at $500 an hour. And then I brought in some coaching clients, just constantly iterating, testing again, not taking very much risk. And then it kind of evolved to give me the confidence to go big. I think too many people go big too soon. I'm a big fan of taking it really easy.
Yeah. And even later in your career too, right? Like people kind of start slow in the beginning and then like have a big win and now think they don't have to start at zero for the next product or the next line of business or learn from the beginning. And I think you're like a really interesting example of like, you have a bunch of different things going, but you start small and low risk each time and like take the baby steps along the way.
And I give up on a lot of shit too. I mean, I think grit and determination is overrated. If something's not working, stop.
What's some stuff that the experiments that you stopped?
Oh, I mean, I started a track camp business in college. I started a t-shirt company in college. I started we started a moving company that we folded. We tried to do a pods, container storage spinoff that I mean, the amount of iterations and things that I've put a little iron in the fire and tested the waters. And if the water's too cold, I just move on.
I have a question for you on your course. There's a section on tax, and I've heard you talk a lot about tax. I'm a little less interested in that and more interested in how you learn it so well. I mean, you can talk at first principles level on very complicated tax issues, and I'm just wondering how you actually learned it.
I think the challenge, so I did a ton of research. I have a really good CPA named Mitchell Baldridge, who's an awesome follow on Twitter as well.
I love Mitchell. He's helped me with a ton of stuff too. So shout out to Mitchell.
Good. Yeah, at Baldridge CPA on Twitter. He's great. He's coming to Athens tomorrow. We're gonna hang out. But anyway, it is complex and it doesn't make it any easier. And what really frustrated me when I was trying to learn it is that the people who know it speak it in a way that you can understand it if you don't know it. It's just like crypto. You cannot learn anything going in a meeting with a crypto dev. And I did a meeting with one yesterday, like speaking Spanish. Same thing with taxes, same thing with real estate, same thing with bankers, same thing with LPs. I mean, if you can dumb down some of these really complex things, and you don't have to not cover it. You can still cover it in the weeds. You can go deep without trying to sound smart by using all the words that nobody understands. So my goal was to attack that tax section and, hey, how can I explain this stuff as simply and as succinctly as possible in a way that anybody can understand it?
There's some famous quote that I'm going to butcher that's like, in the final analysis, every vocation is a conspiracy against the laity. Like everyone is just making it as appear as difficult as possible to do their jobs, to give themselves an advantage, basically, and a moat. Yeah.
And I think if you take a zoom out and go to overall mindset, there's a lot of people who have a scarcity mindset, meaning if I make other people smarter, it'll take something away from me. Or if I spawn a competitor, when I started tweeting about my deals and sharing everything I know about everything on Twitter, a lot of people reached out to me like, Nick, are you crazy? Like what could you possibly gain from this? You're going to have everybody buying self-storage. You're never going to be able to find another deal. It's terrible. And the reality is the exact opposite. It's an abundance mindset. And the more everybody knows and the more you help people, the more your network grows. I mean, Eric, people have paid me for consulting to find a self-storage facility that then become partners in a self-storage facility that I'm doing. It's the synergy is big. Once people gain the trust and once people get to know you and feel comfortable with you. And I've also went above and beyond and helped a lot of people without anything in return as well. And just knowing that, that's how, if you do business like that, it really helps everybody.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's the abundance mindset totally changes things. And it's something that I think it's almost a generational change, right? Like for a lot of what we do, the market is global and networked and uncapped, which is just different than things, it was much more like 50 years ago, you had to protect what you knew. You had to protect your turf, your territory, your local, business.
Yeah. I guess if you're buying self-storage in a town, why would you go to the town meetings and talk about how to buy self-storage in your own town? Right?
Exactly.
You're right. I can talk to people about how to buy storage in California or wherever because there's enough of it to go around because of my reach. But yeah, I think you're right. The folks who pre-internet era, it makes sense to have a scarcity mindset then.
Yeah. The like tools and stuff tools and processes that you use can give you much greater scale, which didn't exist before. So talk to us about, on that note, like some of the tools and like some of the things that give your business maybe unique scale on the self-storage side. Like what are the tools of the trade that give you that ability to manage so many more facilities than somebody could, a few years ago.
Yeah, it's as far as a software stack. I mean, I'm anti software startup on Twitter, but there's nobody who has a better software stack in the self-storage business than me. I don't think. I mean, we have, a Salesforce integration for our acquisitions team. We have Slack for our communication. We have, Asana for our project management. We have, Dropbox for a very organized system to store paperless everything that we do. So there's not a single piece of paper in our whole company. That's our goal. And the communication is getting easier and easier, and COVID only accelerated the comfortability. So, I mean, to put in perspective, we have a new banking relationship in Rochester with what I consider to be a great friend of mine. They've loaned us $20 million to buy storage, and I've never met them in person.
That's incredible.
And that's just unheard of even 5 years ago, even for a bank to get comfortable with that, right? But just the times are changing so fast.
So do you think of to merge your online kind of media empire with your self-storage empire, do you think of those as totally separate businesses? I think I remember seeing a tweet from you that you want to spend half your time buying storage and half your time building, info products and living online. How do those two mix to you? And what's the path forward?
It's really interesting. And I think I wish we had Dan here to talk about this, my partner, because imagine being a partner with somebody in a business that you're trying to grow and scale. And all of a sudden, back in 2018, he starts spending all of his time online, sharing everything that you guys have learned together over the past 2 years. How would you feel about that? He felt fine, but his friends were like, Nick, do you understand your partner is on the internet talking about everything you do, sharing everything on Twitter, taking screenshots of your P&Ls, doing self-storage consulting, teaching other people how to buy self-storage facilities? Do you understand that your partner's doing that? He was like, I think I'm such a good, maybe I got lucky, but I communicated it well enough. I was like, dude, this is going to help us. You watch, just wait, just trust the process. Trust me on this. And before you know it, it did. The synergy around both the media company and the self-storage empire just hit. A, we got the confidence. B, we got the network like Moses and Chris Powers. Then we got the investors. Then we got the audience, everything down to the SEO that we'll get on Bolt Storage when you link to our Bolt Storage website from this podcast. The synergy is just insane. I mean, our hiring tools, the company that we use, Support Shepherd, to hire in the Philippines, without the Twitter connection, we wouldn't have those 7 Filipino employees that we have now that we didn't have 4 months ago. The hiring we have a project manager in Colombia that we hired on Twitter. We have 2 acquisitions folks that we found on Twitter. It's supercharging our business. I think the time that I've spent on Twitter and in my media company over the past year has been the most valuable per hour time that I will spend or have ever spent, over the next 20 years or the last 20 years.
That's awesome. Do you have a sense? There's so many places to go with that. Do you have a sense of what you're worth when you are working at your very best? What maybe the 10 hours that are most value accretive to you are, and what those tasks are?
That's a really good question. I've thought about the leverage behind different activities, and I do a lot of thinking about where I'm most effective. And I do think it's the media, it's the tweet. I mean, that one tweet that changed my life, it took me 4 hours to write, that added, I don't know, millions to my net worth in the long run. When you think about how I'm monetizing Twitter and my brand. Yeah. I mean, I'm becoming a better communicator too. I'm becoming much more well-spoken. I can speak succinctly and quickly and clearly to investors, to employees, to teams, to everybody. So it's just the synergy around all of it is and it's all changing so fast. I think you talked to me in a year, maybe I'll have some more clear thoughts on this in a year, but this has all kind of come at me pretty quickly.
Did you say there was one tweet?
Not one tweet. It was like 50 tweets in a thread.
Oh.
111 tweets on January 3rd. On January 3rd about bad advice, and again stirred a little controversy by about the 5th tweet saying Miami was not the next tech hub, and then Keith Rabeau shit on me as he shits on everybody on Twitter. But it ended up getting 10 million impressions and 50,000 retweets, and I got 35,000 new followers from that.
Whoa. Yeah, we'll link to that. The hot take express.
Weren't you? You were at
I went snowmobiling with my wife, and got cut off from my phone for 2 days and got back and was kind of worn out and a little bit hungover because we had been partying all weekend and just I get home to my wife and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go do some writing. I'm feeling in the mood, and she knows that once a week I'll say that and I'll go produce a bunch of content because it comes in waves. And I've been really getting better about being diligent to create content, and it's really hard. If you talk to any content creator, to like consistently produce it is very hard. But I was like, I feeling pretty good. I actually did a couple tweets from the couch, and then I'm like, honey, I'm gonna go write for a while. And I went down the basement for 4 hours and just laid out a lot of principles that I thought of, and took a life of its own.
Did you do it in Word, or did you just do it straight in?
Right in the app, one after another, unplanned.
Incredible. So on the habit side of things, like, do you force yourself to keep a schedule or create on any schedule, or you're just like, you just let the waves come and go as they feel, and you do whatever else you want to do in the meantime?
Yeah, it's been such a whirlwind, and Twitter is still exciting because I'm only a year in, and the podcast is still exciting, and the real estate is still exciting because everything's happened. I don't know how I'll handle the dip that's coming. I know it's coming, where it becomes work like everything else. It takes discipline for sure. I mean, I do a lot of writing in the mornings. I do a lot of writing late at night. Unfortunately, that really messes up my sleep schedule, because once I get in a creative zone after 6 o'clock, then I know I'm not going to get to sleep till 3 or 4 a.m. But yeah, it's Twitter helps. I mean, getting instant feedback from people, and then following. I also get a ton of inspiration from following folks like James Clear and Jack Butcher and yourself, and seeing what other people are tweeting and compounding on their ideas. I mean, I apply a lot of the frameworks are the same. I mean, I copy a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't ever copy word for word, and I put my own spin on everything, but almost all the concepts are stolen.
Yeah, it's a really interesting seeing how quickly ideas evolve and merge. And, I think like David Perel hit on a formula a few years ago, and just had a similar ascent to you, just grew really, really, really quickly. And Jack had a similar thing too. Like, I love Jack and James both too. They're great follows and great people. We're jumping around a little bit as we like wind up here, I think, because there's so many like loose threads that I want to go back and pull on a little bit, but
yeah, let's do it.
It's totally out of
wow, we are already an hour and 10 minutes in. Wow, that went fast.
It's flying. So did you see were any of Dan's fears, like, I know on net, right, like the sharing of what has vastly outweighed the cons, and you diversified your revenue, and you built your network, and you made it easier to kind of raise money and find opportunities and like find new tools and hires. But like, did any of Dan's fears around like increased competition or increased price in this market, like, has any of that happened? Is it like, when you show up, is there a bidding war for self-storage facilities now, or are you still having to kind of cold call operators and source deals and still getting the prices that you want?
So here's the thing about all of it. I mean, it's a lot of freaking work. Finding the deals is a lot of freaking work. Putting the deals together is a lot of freaking work. Talking to all the LPs is a lot of freaking work. Underwriting it is a lot of freaking work. So, I mean, there's a big moat around really hard work. There's a lot of people who love the idea of self-storage. They love the idea of real estate, and they just don't love the idea of doing all the freaking work. So I don't know. Maybe we've lost out on a deal or two. It's possible for sure, definitely. But I don't think we're going to have any problem accomplishing our goals. I think we're going to still be able to acquire the amount of storage we want to acquire. Obviously way more because of our network on Twitter, but the fears have mostly been fears. I mean, it started back in the day when, I vividly remember very early on, a competitor launched at Wake Forest of student storage. And one of my friends who was a professor at Cornell knew the kid who was starting the business and said, Nick, would you want to come in and see us and maybe talk to this kid about this business? And I went in without even really thinking too much about it at all. I just consulted this kid for an hour on everything we've learned about student storage. And I get out of it and give Dan a call, and I'm like, hey, I just met this kid, talk to him about our business. And he's like, Dan pulls up the kid's website, and he's at the same schools, 2 of the same schools we were at. He's at Penn State and he's at Syracuse operating. And I didn't know that. And I'm like, oh shit. And we're like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And one of our employees was like, Nick, I can't believe you did that. And Dan was like, gosh, Nick, really, you're going to give him our entire playbook? I was literally telling him down to the software we were using. Well, about 3 weeks later, he calls me on my phone. The kid calls me and goes, hey, Nick, we just got inside information that Emory in Atlanta is doing a bid for a contract. We're in the bidding, but we can't win. We're not big enough. They told us that we don't have enough experience. You need to call this number, tell them Sam sent you, and put in a bid for this contract. Well, fast forward 3 weeks later, we got the contract in Emory that added $100,000 of value to our business. So even that
amazing.
Turned out to be a net gain.
There's no way to go wrong just trusting that karma will pay you back and being generous to a fault and letting the dominoes fall. I love that.
It's wild.
I have a question for you around capital and how you're thinking about it these days. It seems like you're investing and reinvesting everything into Bolt. But by the way, I listened to a different podcast. 95% of Pomp's net worth is in crypto, Bitcoin specifically, 95%, and he wants to keep it that way. But my question for you is, Pomp's talked about this barbell strategy where you're going to do things that are very low risk. He thinks Bitcoin's extremely low risk. It's contrarian, but and then he's also doing things that are very, very, very high risk. So are you going to go into angel investing in that sort of route as well to have a barbell built?
Angel investing is fun, but I think it's donating money to the cause, and unless you have inside information and really good deal flow, which maybe I can generate through Twitter, I will not do a lot of angel investing. I have a lot of equities, and they're on the other end of the barbell from sweaty self-storage. I own a lot of Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Apple stock, and I'm going to continue to own a lot of it. We keep almost half of our cash reserves in those stocks. I'm talking 7 figures, and own a little bit of crypto as well. So yeah, I definitely diversify a little bit outside of storage, but most of my capital has a home, luckily, because I know that deploying capital is a problem right now. But yeah, I agree with Pomp. If he believes in crypto to that extreme, there's no problem at all with taking that kind of risk. And he also has a media company that, in my opinion, is worth $50 million already. So I think he's going to be fine.
I don't think anybody's losing sleep over Pomp. Yeah, he'll be just fine.
I'm going to start buying some crypto this week, actually. That's not an endorsement.
So what was your, we'll just add a whole new leg to this stool in the last 5 minutes. Where did the crypto thing come from? Because I think that's such a, I don't know, it tends to be not a component of most sweaty startup mindset world. So how did that come about? Were you following Jack and seeing the NFT world come in? And
so I bought a lot of Ethereum and Bitcoin in late April, right before the big run up, but still when it was pretty damn high, higher than it is now. So we've lost some money in crypto, but it should be a part of it's an opportunity. And then when this tomato stuff went nuts, I think there's no better launching pad to launch a shit meme coin and learn a lot about crypto. So the goal is not to make money. Obviously we're going to try, and the developers that we got on board think we can, but no, it's just, we're learning a crap load about Uniswap and pools and liquidity, and it's fun. I'm learning a little bit about it, and it was an opportunity.
Yeah, it is cool. I've been playing with that world a little bit too. Though if you're launching a coin, you're way ahead of me. Is it fair to ask what's the function of is it tomato coin?
Yeah, it's tomato coin, and it's as every crypto, it's a speculative store of value, right? There's no purpose, but it's going to farm more tomatoes. So the pool 1 is obviously the staking to get the initial, capital. Pool 2 is the liquidity pool for the, automated market makers, which I think is really fascinating, that the algorithms make the market of how valuable the crypto is. And then pool 3 will be where you stake your tomatoes to earn more tomatoes. So it's gonna bring to life the tweet. And if you're listening to this without following on Twitter, there was a really stupid thing that happened a week ago where this guy posted something with a typo that he'd rather have $50 a month than $1 million right now. And everybody was just ripping this guy, shitting on him bad. Obviously, who in their right mind would take $50 a month the rest of their life instead of $1 million? And at the end, he said, that's what passive income's all about. And he was like, I just got done with cardio and I missed a couple of zeros. I wanted 5,000 there. But everybody was ripping this guy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be stupid and make a joke and go with him. And I was like, you know what? I'll take option B as well. I'll take the $50 a month. People don't understand that, $50 a month can give you access to the internet and you can learn and make more money. $50 a month can pay your cell phone bill, which you know how valuable a cell phone bill is to make money. And then $50 a month can rent a power washer one day a month and you can make a bunch of money. I thought clearly that everybody's going to know that was a joke.
And
Nobody.
You had
Nobody
responded to a well-known parody account like Dr. Parikh Patel or whatever.
No, this was before Parikh. This was before Parikh. So I made that tweet about the power washer and the $50 a month. And then I got ripped. I started getting ripped by everybody. Nobody knew it was a joke. So Parikh Patel, I trolled Parikh. I trolled the ultimate troll. He's like, Nick, you're wrong. Like I can get that's 0.17% yield. An annuity would do, 100 times better than that for you. And then I responded to him and I was like, you don't understand scale, doctor. Use that $50 a month to go buy 10 tomato plants. And when that 10 tomato plants yields 100 tomatoes, plant all 100 tomatoes. And then when you plant all those, you get 100 tomato plants. That's going to yield 10,000 tomatoes. And it was just a stupid thing. And they still didn't get it. They thought I was serious. All the farmers went nuts. People started calling me a bunch of bad names in my DMs. And so now we're making tomato coin so that actual tomatoes can yield more tomatoes with absolutely no overhead.
It is so hilarious. Like, I think of Twitter as like a giant, like I treat it like my living room and I just like say what I want to say. And I find it so interesting that people just like, they will find one comment and I just imagine them like the Kool-Aid man. They just like barge through a wall and like hear one comment out of context and like just start trying to tear you apart to all their friends. And like, I don't know, it's just the like grossest, gossipiest thing of people like, if you're not going to take the time to understand the context that the comment was made in, like, just don't say anything. Like, just don't say anything.
It's hilarious how it works, man. And so, yeah, the goal of our goal is to troll all those idiots who were trying to troll me. So we made tomatotoken.farm as a website with all the jokes on there. So if you want to get caught up on the jokes, you can see that website.
I love it. I mean, life gives you tomatoes, you make tomato juice, I guess.
Yeah, I saw the DM screenshots you took, and that guy was so angry at you. That farmer.
Oh, the one that said I had soft little bitch hands and knew nothing about agriculture. You know nothing about agriculture, Mr. Huber. And I said, you don't understand scale, and then he went off. It was a joy.
That might be a good place to wrap up, unless you have anything further, Eric.
No, I think we've thoroughly lost the thread, and now is a good time to wrap.
You guys can cut that out if you want to.
Well, thanks for being here, Nick. A hugely educational opportunity to talk with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. Yeah,
Thanks,
you guys, I'm a big fan of your work, and I'm excited to what you're going to accomplish. So I'm happy to be a part of it, and look forward to collaborating more in the future. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Nick.
Love it. Thanks, Nick. Better.